they've looked at all strikers across Europe, and it would be remiss of them not to look at the guy that's absolutely doing numbers in Portugal. I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast or not before, but somebody said to me a few years ago when he was at Coventry, United should look at this guy.
Really?
Yeah. And
Do you remember who said it?
Yeah, I know exactly who said it.
Hello and welcome to Stretford, Paddock. My name is Joe, and this is Inside United with Laurie Whitwell, the regular show on the channel. Very good to have you back on, Laurie. How are you?
So pleased to be here, guys. Straight up from London.
I know, yeah. You've got all the goss, the latest details on Manchester United. We're going to be getting into, a lot of different things, of course, as always, but we're going to be looking a little bit at transfers today, because there seems to be, we're sort of learning a bit more about what Amorim likes, what he doesn't like, and there are sort of reports coming out about who United might want to bring in, or certainly the areas in which we want to strengthen. Obviously, Jay Mott is here as well. How are you, Jay?
Yeah, good. Thanks for coming down again, Laurie. It's always a pleasure. Hey.
Always a pleasure indeed. Let's start, before we get to the transfer stuff, let's start a little bit with yesterday, because obviously, like I said, straight from London, you were at the game. What was the feeling around the ground, sort of in the press conference? What did you get from being there that we sort of, maybe not necessarily the gap between us and Arsenal, but just a general sense of how the project is going under Amorim so far?
Yeah, obviously it's still early days, isn't it? Fourth game, right? First defeat. So this will be interesting. How do you deal with a defeat? He's obviously had them at Sporting in his career, but it feels like there's way more scrutiny here. There's lots more pressure, lots more questions, lots more opinions around the place, different personalities that he's going to have to deal with in the dressing room. But he was calm again. In the press conference afterwards, I think he knows that, or he's obviously decided, and he's telling us that it is a situation that is going to be taking time to come to fruition, new system and players playing in different positions. That was probably one of the biggest takeaways that I had from the game, how much he changed it. 6 changes from the win over Everton. It was a quick turnaround, and he's got another game coming up on Saturday, and then I think I've worked out 15 games in 57 days up to February the 1st. So you've got...
Good luck.
Yeah. How do you actually really instill a style of play and get players in the way that you want them to be? He's basically saying the matches are going to be the training sessions a lot of the time. So 6 changes, and then even within that, 5 substitutions throughout the game, plus sort of 3 players changing their positions during the game to accommodate the players that were coming on. So it's a lot of different relationships being constructed, a lot of players having to do different things, and that being there, and you're quite close to the pitch at the Emirates, you're right behind the dugout, so you can see the instructions that are being given by Amorim and different people, and then also the players' reaction. So we can maybe touch on that a little bit. But I feel like he's still calm. He's not the kind of guy that comes in a press conference and starts dropping bombs. He had a little slight, not dig, but a moment with Mikel Arteta, I think, where he was saying that Gabriel Martinelli and Bukayo Saka, more often than not go on the outside when they're taking on their opposition fullback, so they can win these corners. And they had 13 didn't in the game to United 0, and so I think he was saying, obviously Arsenal, they don't mind playing for set pieces, which Mikel Arteta bristled at a little bit. So he's got a little bit of edge, Amorim. He's not afraid to sort of say a few things that might ruffle feathers, but I think overall he's still presenting that calm demeanour.
I know it's when we went to the Bodo Glimt game, me and Macaulay were sat in different. We were sat near the dugout. I've spoke about this on the channel a couple of times, and we saw obviously Ruben Amorim very animated, chatting to a lot of players. You mentioned it there. He was chatting to players during the game. What was the reaction like from the players? What did you get? How did you get there? Are they being receptive to what he's trying to tell them in the actual games themselves?
I think so, yeah. There's a couple of moments that stick out for me. So Mazraoui was the left-sided centre-half for this game. So is that like the 5th different position he's played this season already, maybe?
Pretty much, yeah.
Both different full-backs, right? Number 10, obviously.
Oh, yeah. Both sides of the centre-back.
Yeah. So there we go, 5th. And he was a bit, I think, sceptical about Amorim asking him to go and push on to Martin Odegaard, who was obviously in the number 10 position, kind of in between the lines. He wants his defenders to go and commit kind of man-to-man, doesn't he? And Mazraoui, I think, is very good at that. But I think maybe on the other side, he was a little bit uncertain exactly which player to pick up, because it was, I don't know, slightly alien position for him. So he was having that kind of conversation after about 5-6 minutes. And then also Ahmad, when he came on at half-time, he was on the right wing-back position, which we're now familiar with him. But Amorim was straight onto him saying, get up, attack. And because I think he was kind of like a little bit, just trying to settle into the game. And actually, he did go and I thought he did pretty well. Took on Zinchenko, didn't he, doing that kind of
got him subbed,
winning the ball exactly straight away. I was thinking, right, this could be a good little.
That's what we were saying, weren't we? On the because he got we got butts, and you're thinking, right, great, Zinchenko on a booking against Amad Diallo, and then he was like, Arteta was having none of it.
Straight away, you're coming off.
Tim straight over there. Yeah.
But it was, the Amad thing pushing him on. then Ahmad was quite high for another bit of play where you had, I think, De Ligt kind of lost the ball or kind of lost a duel in the middle of the park, and then it was Martinelli up against Maguire all of a sudden, who was the centre back at that point, and Maguire did really well, got the block.
He took that shot really early, didn't he, Martinelli, and got the block,
So these are kind of the teething problems you're going to get.
Yeah, just with, like you mentioned there about him in press conferences, and maybe he's got a little bit of an edge to him. Like you said, he thinks that they were going wide rather than cutting in on purpose to get the set pieces. In terms of like, you're in those press conferences, you speak to other journalists constantly, you sort of speaking to each other. What is the feeling about him now? We've got a bit more about it. We've not lost, but no longer is he quite in that like, wow, he's not Ten Hag. He's kind of starting to stand on his own 2 feet a bit more. Do people like him? Because I do think that it's not, obviously winning games is really the only thing that matters in terms of keeping your job. But I think certain people, the press and social media and fans even, will turn on a bit quicker than others based on what they say in press conferences and how they present themselves. Do you think he's kind of impressing people on that front?
Yeah, I think he's a very impressive person. Yeah. He's a very likeable person. Because obviously he's confident, right? He knows what his idea of football is. He believes that he can have success at Manchester United. He's had success at Sporting, but there is a humility there. Mark Ogden of ESPN asked him after the game, so was this the storm you were talking about ahead of the game? It was a great quote for newspapers. It's a good headline. We will be found out as well. He said, so it's quite honest. It feels that way. Like, I know sometimes you might say things like that to kind of just lessen expectations, but I do think it's also what he believes. So anyway, this quote got brought up to him after the game, and he was like, "Yeah, maybe I went a bit strong there." Like we all do. He kind of felt quite familiar, in that way. But I think it disarms people, certainly journalists. I think we lap that kind of stuff up. It's nice to be able to ask any question and feel you're on a level with the guy, and there's the mutual respect there, and he's not going to kind of jump down your throat because of something you've asked. There's certainly other managers that I think get quite prickly on certain topics. It feels like if you phrase a question in a fair way, honest way, open way, that he will answer it as fully as he can do.
Yeah. He seems quite keen as well to, like, I know this, I'm not trying to just be pure positivity, but from what I see of him, when he gets asked a question, he answers it honestly, but it feels like you're genuinely talking or listening to someone who knows more than you about managing a team.
Yeah.
Like, I know obviously all managers from, David Moyes or, Louis van Gaal or whatever, they all know more than us about managing footballers. But sometimes you think people are trying to hide stuff, or there was that thing with Ten Hag last season where someone asked him a question about repeating the same mistakes or whatever, and he went, well, what mistakes? Or, he sort of pushed back, and then the journalist said, well, this and this.
Ladyman, I think it was, yeah.
And in that situation, you kind of think, you're pretending that reality isn't happening a little bit.
Right, okay.
And I feel like with Amorim, he gives you a genuine answer that is actually based on a bit more thought and inquisitiveness than I even have, or that you even, I feel like you're talking to an expert in something. Did you get that feeling with him?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, and I mean, it's easy, isn't it, to watch people from afar and sort of try and interpret what's going on, but they do carry themselves pretty well. We're talking about them being young guys. Carlos Fernandes is his number 2. He's 30, and he's the one that is out on the edge of the touchline kind of when the set pieces are happening. It does seem pretty serious. Like, he's not like some guy that kind of can't believe his luck that he's here. I think he clearly believes he is, and when you speak to people around the place, they've been impressed with the way he's communicated with these players. Adelio Candido's 28. It's crazy, isn't it? But again, he looks like he belongs in a way. Like, it doesn't look like a 28-year-old is what I'm trying to say. And again, it's early days, and maybe I'm looking at things through rose-tinted spectacles, but I don't know, the signs I think are quite good there. And then to your point in terms of the press conference in Amorim, I'm told that he doesn't want to be speaking all the time. He sort of had that little sort of kind of joke, I suppose, after the Ipswich game, didn't he? When he was like, right, I've told the communications director that I don't want any more, these kind of weeks.
We keep mentioning it as well, but he absolutely pissed himself when someone said long time no see to him.
Did you see that?
Simon Peach, yeah.
He genuinely
thought that was hysterical. We loved the fact that he found it so funny, because it's such an obvious thing that everyone says. Simon knows it. And he was just laughing his head off for like 10 seconds.
It did feel like genuine.
It was a real laugh. It wasn't a fake laugh. It was like, I think it encapsulated all the things you just mentioned there about, like, this is a big thing that he's talking to everyone all the time, but you say he's not keen to do that constantly.
I think he just doesn't want to, because I think he sees the players, he understands players. He's 39, he's not long been a player, so I think he understands that players don't really, in this modern era maybe, want to hear from the manager all the time, and he's the guy he's the public face of the club. That's where his messages are going to be conveyed in a press conference. I think he understands that he'd rather do those kind of communications, in a coaching setting and on a training pitch. But that being said, he just kind of is quite good at speaking and natural, so he will answer your questions. But I think he's conscious of he's not like a Jose Mourinho who will come into a press conference with an agenda, wanting to have a certain say and certain sway. I think he kind of he's a bit egoless in that sense. I genuinely think that he could, like I say, it could be part of the strategy, but I do think that he doesn't necessarily want all the adulation, all the kind of acclaim on him.
You mentioned there the amount of games and the sort of coming thick and fast, and he mentioned in his press conference about changes, about he's going to keep changing the team, paraphrasing it, but basically there's going to be a lot of rotation. What did you make of that? What did you make of the fact that he's talking about that and being honest about it and open it? And there is this sense that, certainly from a fan point of view, that it feels to us like a lot of these players are almost on trial. Like it's like he's looking at him and saying, who can I rely on, who can't I? And he's giving everyone a chance. Yeah,
I think, again, that's sort of a way of keeping players on side to begin with, right? I'm sure as time goes on, he'll have a preferred 11, and then you might get these issues. Okay, it's not all happy. I've been left out. Why have I been left out? And you'd have some pushback there for sure. How he handles that'll be interesting. But yeah, I think it's the fact that you've got, Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday, Thursday. You've got games
all the way up until the new year. It's every game midweek, the weekend as well, isn't it?
He's saying he's saying it's a legitimate. I have to do this. Rotate. I asked him the question last night about the changes, and he said that Maguire, you have to limit his minutes. Mason Mount, you have to limit his minutes. Malacia, you have to limit his minutes. Lenny Yori, you really have to limit his minutes. So I'd be surprised if we saw him starting, for example, against Nottingham Forest or anytime soon. But to your point, I think he's also trying to test out who's going to work, who's going to do it for him.
I mean, there's loads of players to talk about in terms of contracts, and we'll get to the likes of Ahmad in a minute. But in terms of transfers in and buying players, we're in a different system now, one where wingers seem to be trying to find a new home. Like their homes have been knocked down, and they've got to decide whether they want to be a fullback or a number 10. And what's Garnacho and Rashford going to do? That's all up in the air. It feels like, well, we'll get into a few names specifically, and we'll talk about positions as well. The first one that everyone is talking about is Victor Gyökeres, because he's probably the most informed striker in Europe over the last 18 months. He used to play for Ruben Amorim. He's played in England before. A lot of things seem to add up. I think he's got this, was it something like €100 million release clause, which doesn't necessarily have to be met, but there's now an upper limit on what that transfer could be. Do you believe there's genuine interest in him, and do you believe he's interested in United?
I think there's genuine interest there. I mean, they've looked at all strikers across Europe, and it would be remiss of them not to look at the guy that's absolutely doing numbers in Portugal. I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast or not before, but somebody said to me a few years ago when he was at Coventry, United should look at this guy.
Really?
Yeah. And
do you remember who said it?
Yeah, I know exactly who said it, but I can't say. Someone in the industry, let's say.
Okay.
And I was like, really? And obviously this person knows a lot more about football than I do, and they could see, but they were equally aware of the fact that United would just never sign someone from Coventry. Will that change? You always
talk about that, don't you? Like, you need some players need that stepping stone.
Yeah. So that's it. Would he have done what he's done at Sporting at United? Maybe not, because at Sporting he's had a system that really is geared to his abilities. We've seen it, haven't we, in the games where we've watched, and it really does flow nicely when he's the number 9, sorry. He drops into that number 10 position. You've got the number 10s wrapping around him and the wing backs bombing on and getting the ball in the box. I think that was something last night that was clear. Amorim getting really frustrated at some of the attacking play when they're in the final third, because they had more possession in the first half than Arsenal, didn't they? Yeah. But they weren't doing the things in the final third that was getting Hoyle in the service, getting the ball in the box. Garnacho ran down a couple of blind alleys, and he was getting really irritated. And I asked him about that afterwards, and he said that that's the more difficult bit of the job. We haven't had enough time to kind of build these processes into the team in this way that I want them to be. So sorry, back to your point. I'm filibustering here, but Gyökeres, the only thing that I think David Ornstein in the Athletic wrote that €70 million might be enough for Gyökeres this summer. So obviously January, just forget about it. But is that too much for United? They'll have to make a decision whether they want to go to the place where Amorim's been so successful, and basically they've already had it, haven't they, with Erik ten Hag, where Ajax players or Dutch related players. I don't think that should preclude anything happening with Ruben Amorim, but I wonder if they might be looking at alternatives as well. There's a couple other names that you can kind of think of. Benjamin Sesko, someone that they've been tracking for ages.
For years. That's like
since he was at Domzale
almost.
Yeah, it was. Like saying he was about. Well, I've written before where he was sort of available for like €2 million, and United were like, "How about 1 million?" And they were like, "No, it's 2 million. He's going to go to Red Bull Salzburg otherwise." Okay, how about 1.1? No, it's 2. And eventually, this negotiation obviously failed from United's perspective,
right.
and yeah, in the end, he went somewhere else. And then they looked at him actually again. They looked at him last summer before Joshua Zirkzee, and then also in, I think, Erik ten Hag's first summer, I'm trying to think, but he didn't feel comfortable, I'm told, being like that number 9 for United straight away at that point in his career. He kind of preferred to do things out of the limelight, which again is to your point on Gyökeres, coming from Coventry. If he had been signed by United, he would have obviously been a rotation striker, and
that's like I always think that with then everyone criticises United for not signing Haaland from Norway.
Yeah,
I always think but he would have come in and been a backup for how many years to either Martial or would it have been Cavani or Ronaldo? Like, would he be the player because he was first choice in Norway, first choice at Red Bull, first choice at Dortmund, first choice at City. But if you get him as a 20-year-old or a 19-year-old, does he then go on to be that same superstar? Sometimes you need it to work a certain way. So with Sesko, I almost applaud him for saying, I don't want to come in and be a backup because I want to prove to everyone that I'm a starting striker and get there eventually, which I kind of respect that, to be honest.
Yeah, because you always say it about Caicedo as well, like we were linked with him, weren't we? Make that move.
Well, they were massively in talks with him.
Yeah.
They basically nearly...
Would that have been the same?
It was the agency thing around that was too difficult. They decided, and obviously Brighton managed to find the right way of communicating it and getting the deal over the line.
What do you make of that argument, Laurie? Because we hear it a lot, and for me it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like, we don't want to start doing with Ten Hag, with Amorim, what we did with Ten Hag. We kept going back to Ajax, back to the Dutch leagues. Now we're going to do the same with Ruben Amorim. It does feel different to me though, because the most obvious issue United have got is who's going to be our number 9. He's just come from a club where a number 9 is absolutely smashing it with like record goals. It's not the same as, I don't think so anyway, Ten Hag going back to Ajax for Martinez and for not that Martinez hasn't been a good signing, and Anthony, and it does feel different to me. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I understand. I think the only other aspect to it, and this is, I'm sort of dodging your question to begin with, is Rasmus Højlund, where you're like, to your point, Joe, like, if you don't keep giving him the opportunities in a run, will he ever become the player that you're hoping him to be? So there's that dynamic to it. So what kind of, and obviously Gyökeres is they're just very similar, aren't they? And he's older, like 5 years older. He would obviously just be the guy you'd expect him to be every week. I don't mind if Amorim knows the players and they fit the system. That's obviously a crucial element, where this system is obviously so different to what Erik ten Hag was working with. You need players that do actually come into it knowing the roles and athletically able to carry out the responsibilities. I think you'd always just hope that there's thousands of players in the world. Like, okay, I know only a very small fraction can play for Manchester United, but surely there's alternatives if you don't have to just go back to Sporting. Although I am going to probably at some point mention another Sporting player that I think might be looked at.
Well, let's just go straight to that then. So what's the name on the tip of your tongue there?
Well, see, you're going to make me pronounce it now, aren't you?
Go on.
Giovanni Kenda is how I'm told it's pronounced.
Really? Even with that Q?
With the Q, yeah. I want to say Quenda, but...
I kept doing that.
What?
Quenda. Well, I was saying all sorts of stuff.
It's hard. We were saying this before, but Portuguese pronunciations seem, for me, of all the European pronunciations, the one that are the least like how they're spelled to an English eye. Like Bruno Fernandes is Fernandes. And they all have that really sort of shortening and tightening of like vowels and stuff. So let's go with Kenda.
It's a beautiful language, isn't it? It feels
language. What was charisma?
I'd probably just...
Good point. That's a cue, isn't it? You're going for that as a
yeah.
That's a cue, isn't it?
Yeah. That's a cue, isn't it?
Well, you don't say charisma, do you?
What do you say?
Charisma.
Charisma. Yeah,
no. Well, how would you pronounce it?
I'd say charisma.
Charisma.
Yeah, but again, that's probably not right to.
Okay. What would you say?
If anyone's listening who knows what we're on about, please put in the comments.
I thought it was charisma.
Yeah,
Charisma.
We're hearing charisma.
Charisma. I also thought it was.
Well, there you go. But so let's go with Kenda then, because that's it seems
You've
to be
done your own
the
work
closest
as well.
to the.
It's shoulder short of Tere all over again.
That was a tricky one.
But then we went through all this thing, right, where we were saying short tire, and then people say no, it's short of Tere, and then someone from MUTV and I got in touch and went, I've spoke to him, it's short of Tere, and then he did this video himself where he introduced himself and went short tire.
Well, isn't it true, Erling Haaland? So obviously Haaland should be Haaland, but because everyone knows him as Haaland now, he's like, no, it's Haaland. He's and it's part of the brand,
right?
I see. Yeah, which is fair enough, isn't it?
So Kenda Quenda needs to decide before his big money move to Old Trafford what he's going to be.
That's the most important thing.
So for people who don't know about him, who is he? What's he like? You know, is exceptional certain attributes about him in there.
Yeah, so he plays right wing back for Sporting. So he's broken through this season. He's only 17. So United couldn't sign him until he's 18, for example, because of Brexit laws. So he's 18 in April. So next summer potentially. And it was interesting just when we were asking Amorim on Monday about Ahmad, why are you playing Ahmad as a right wing back? The first thing he said was his left foot, which is, so obviously he's very technically gifted, but he can just open up more angles if he's on the outside, the far outside, from that right wing back slot than a right footer could. So I feel like he will want a left footer in that role more often than not. It's even why I was I was wrong, but I thought maybe Malacia might start there last night. And in the end, I think he probably just thought keep him on the side that he's most familiar with. He's been a long time out. But so Kenda does that. He's I think very skillful from what I've seen of him, and obviously he knows the role sort of that he wants inside out. So I just feel like he might be one to watch just because he's so young and he's obviously doing the business in difficult matches in the Champions League as well. So keep an eye maybe on that one.
Just talking to youngsters, Godwill Kukonki was at the game in the squad. I know he travelled to the Ipswich game but wasn't in the squad, was on the bench against Arsenal. Do you think he's someone who could get minutes, or is that just, I don't know, giving him a bit of experience of being with the squad? But where do you think his future lies this season? Yeah,
I think he's 16, isn't he? Yeah. So he's very, very young. Although he's 6'5", he's an athletic guy. So he's obviously advanced for his age, and again left-footed. So I think that was partly why he was travelling with the squad to Ipswich, because Martinez ultimately was out the team, and there was a little bit of doubt over Luke Shaw. Luke Shaw was fine in the end. Obviously, I know he's now injured, but I think they were a little bit cautious. And Amorim just seems to be someone that loves having a balance of players in his team with left footers and right footers. So I think he's obviously done really well in training. He's impressed Amorim. He's ahead of. I don't think it's necessarily this guy is going to be. There's still some discussion around what his ultimate level is, but I think he's obviously seized the opportunity so far in training, and to be named on a bench at Arsenal is an incredible feat at the age that he's at. And that's an area clearly, 3 centre backs where you're going to need additional bodies.
Obviously you mentioned sort of left footers and right footers, and that feels like quite a modern thing of like left-footed centre backs in particular being this like prized commodity, because obviously it's a 1 in 10-ish people are left-footed or handed or whatever. It's because I'm left-handed, so I know it.
And left-footed?
Yes.
Okay.
I can actually play left centre back if you need me. If Amorim needs
how tall are you?
6'4".
Yeah.
I can do it.
There you go, you see.
I can literally do it.
When you've got Joe
I'm
Smith.
31 as well. I'm in my physical prime now. Physical and mental prime. Like, if this is the time, just give me one chance, please. That's all I ask. 10 minutes against Everton. I've already played Everton. Forest. Anyway, no, I'm joking, of course. But it just feel like.
Thanks for clearing that up, because we thought
I wasn't serious.
It was a genuine pitch then.
Because here's the thing, I don't think I'm probably quite good enough to play for Man United, if I'm honest.
Really?
No.
I've seen you. I think you're underrating yourself.
I can do it.
You're very good.
But it does seem like it's an area of the pitch that United, especially that left wing back role, we're very thin there, because Luke Shaw, even if fully fit, whatever that is for him these days, hasn't got the legs to do that anymore. I don't think can trust his body to do that. Malacia, we're still unsure as well what level he'll get back to, and even if he gets back to his best, is that good enough? Do you think that left wing back spot is going to be a real sort of point of focus for him? Yeah,
I think so. I think that's the one area. I keep getting told that January is don't count on it at all, basically.
Okay.
Which to me, they've gone through various Januaries where they haven't signed anybody, right? I mean, Ten Hag's last January, right? Nobody came in. And even the one before that, it was Wout Weghorst on loan and Sabitzer on loan, and that was only because of injury to Eriksen, right? So, and they had to have a striker, so it was like absolute necessity in that window. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go through January not buying anybody. That being said, and Amorim's sort of spoken on that theme, hasn't he? I want to work with the players that I've got, but surely all managers, coaches want new players for their way of playing. But the only position maybe could be that left wing back role if they thought we really need to address it now. So yeah, let's see. I suppose. I mean, the one other one I sort of wondered whether it was an opportunity for United or just someone that I think is pretty good is Milos Kirkos at Bournemouth.
Scored a great goal.
Great goal. I thought he'd scored loads of goals for Bournemouth. That was his first goal.
Yeah. Did you see that? It was like the quick 1-2 pass, and then he just drills it into the roof of the net.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. But he's been dangerous. I think got a few assists this season, and
that's what I mean. I think we
were linked with him in the summer as well, weren't we?
Right,
yeah, a little bit. Just
So maybe they have already. United will obviously be tracking all these players, and there'll be little conversations here. Like what's his contract situation like? But he's only 21, so again, you sort of think the Ineos sort of process has been younger players so that they can develop and maybe have resale value if necessary.
Obviously PSR is a thing. The United haven't got loads of money to throw about. Can we expect a lot of players to leave in the summer? Is there going to be a bit of a fire sale, do you think, or even just players' contracts coming to an end?
Yeah, they'll have to, won't they, to get the funds in. I mean, I'm even hearing that the summer might be a tricky one for them. I mean, they were sort of saying that last summer and they ended up spending 180 million. Okay, it was over a number of years, and obviously they brought in quite a decent chunk in the end in sales. But I do think, again, sales will have to be a sort of primary objective of the summer. But it's difficult, right? Like they've got players that are on decent contracts. Who's going to buy them for the price that United would want them for? You're right. I mean, they've got quite a few players coming out of contract, right? So I think Lindelof's contract's up.
Yeah.
Harry Maguire's contract's up, although they've got a +1 if they want to exercise that. Christian Eriksen, his contract's up. So you might just naturally get a few players that go out, and then obviously that saves on the wages, which is a factor in PSR, FFP.
Another big one whose contract is up in the summer is Ahmad, who's been up there as one of the best players under.
Get him signed. Get the old Rio meme out. Get the contracts on the table.
Give him what he wants. Post Ten Hag, he's been one of our best players. Surely that will get done if they wanted to. Are you hearing any sort of movement on that?
I think so. Yeah, nothing to be honest beyond what I've already written and then asked. I asked Ahmad. I was like, want to stay here for a long time. I think I did it 3 times.
Very long,
And then Amorim on Monday said, I don't envisage any problems there. We want him to stay. I think he wants to stay. So yeah, that could be. They're in talks. He's got a +1 as well, so it's not as the intake of breath there, Jay, was a bit dramatic.
I just don't like. Well, I worry whenever a contract's ending. Amad Diallo is one of the few bright spots this season. Let's have it right.
And it might be interesting as his career progresses. So he's 22 now, right?
Yeah, I think so.
As his career progresses, it will be interesting just to reevaluate that whole transfer, because I gave United stick at the time for paying what I thought was over the odds for an 18-year-old who'd had
60 minutes. I think he'd had in total. Well, just under 60 minutes.
20 million euros rising up to a potential 40, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think ultimately United was saying it was a £37 million deal. So I could be wrong. I think it was 18 up front and 19 in potential add-ons. So it'd be interesting to know how many of those add-ons have been realised right now. But at the time, they basically wanted to portray it as a £37 million deal, the Glazers ultimately, because they were getting stick for not signing Jadon Sancho and not spending any money. So they're like, right, well, make sure this is known as like a big transfer. And so maybe his whole career is a little bit been coloured by that. But
we spoke to, I remember we had Romano on the channel at the time, and he praised that deal purely because he said he'd spoken to people at Atlanta who trained with him and just like, this kid's phenomenal, and he thought he might end up going to Juve or somewhere, and he said United have gone early with it, but he said I don't actually blame him. I think it's quite a savvy move, because he thinks he would have waited for him to get some more games, other clubs would have been like, oh, this kid is actually special, and it's like we went mega early. But at the time, I mean, we were doing the sort of transfer deadline day, and it was 37 million for a kid who's played an hour of football. Seemed insane.
And it's been such a sort of slow burn with him as well, hasn't it? He's been like, for a player of that price, I can't think of any in United's history that have been brought in for such a fee and then had so few opportunities in the first team for so long. This is his 4th season at the club, I think. And he's only now a sort of first choice regular, but it's quite unique, isn't it?
That's why I would always say the fee was still high, because he might go on to be this when you look at it and go, actually, okay, fine, bargain, ultimately. But I don't know, I feel like it has taken a long time to get it. For that kind of money, you want them to be you kind of want them to be a first team player, really. Yeah. I mean, he came in and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer didn't know exactly where he was. He thought he was an academy player, but obviously then you see the fee and you're like, oh right, wow, okay, maybe he's part of my squad. And so that was always a little bit of uncertainty. But that's not to do anything against him as a player. He's obviously a fabulously talented player, really committed. I mean, you just have to admire the way he goes in for these tackles. Like, he's really ferocious, isn't he, when he's out of possession? So, which is often the thing that you criticise those gifted players for. Yeah.
Just moving on a little bit from the player stuff. Obviously, we've seen this protest at Old Trafford at the weekend, and this kind of backlash against some of the moves and sort of financial decisions that Ineos have made. It's been like a handful of things that have sort of slowly increasing frustration, I think, hasn't there? People losing jobs, and the whole thing with Sir Alex, and then now there's this thing of all the remaining unsold tickets are going to be £66 regardless. You know, a 80-year-old granddad taking his 10-year-old son costs 130 quid. His 10-year-old grandson, sorry. I mean, if any of the Rolling Stones are in, then that might be the case. But, an 8-year-old and an 8-year-old going together to the game costs 130 quid. Yeah. That's absurd, isn't it?
It's disgraceful, really.
Yeah, it is. And have you seen, has there been any I know there was the official response, which basically went, deal with it, knobs. Or, essentially, what it was as blunt and as, we don't want to do it, but we're doing it. There was no compassion to that kind of statement. Do you think we'll hear any more from that? Will this change how they do things going forward, do you think?
Yeah, but definitely this will be an on-running story now. I mean, this feels like the thin end of a wedge, where ultimately they want to raise ticket prices because they want to build a new stadium. How do we fund that? The club is already in enormous amounts of debt because of the Glazers leverage takeover that I don't think you can ever not mention. How that happened is beyond me. But then that leaves, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who's ultimately the guy that makes this kind of decision, with a conundrum of, should I raise ticket prices to the point where I feel comfortable? I feel that United should be an expensive afternoon for people because it's one of the world's biggest clubs. I think that is blind to the fact that you've got a local community that is just beyond what they can afford, and you have to have these people in the stadium because that will give you the atmosphere, that will give you what you want. That's what a football club is about. It's about the community fabric, and that's what people were protesting about before the game at the Trinity stand. Obviously, 1958, I think we're behind that one. You've also got Must, Fab, the Fans Forum that have written a letter to Omar Barada, criticising quite strongly, the way, the process as well, because that's the other thing, right? They've been. The fan engagement protocol that they have to do as part of the Premier League regulations. So they signed off on that, and then they've just unilaterally raised ticket prices midway through a season. It's you could say quite a few things about it in strong terms. So Jim Ratcliffe will say that he needs to balance the books, as you say, PSR, FFP. But I mean, we're hearing that ultimately this particular ticket rise gets United an extra about 1.5 million. Like, when you look at what they've spent money on elsewhere, then it just pales into insignificance. When talk about Anthony's transfer fee, 86 million, and I don't want to single out players. It's not their fault what transfer fees are, but you can certainly point the finger at the people that were making those decisions and signing those off, that they can't now be, hands off, how's this happened, But I do then, whatever those circumstances are, I feel like you come back to it and you have to have good, affordable prices for people, because otherwise the spirit will die.
Yeah, the optics of it are terrible. Like you say now, Joe, no concessions. Yeah. So I know is it like a 3% of the
3%? But then if you give your season ticket back, they can then resell that for the £66.
And that looks terrible as well. Like it seems like
no discount for Europa League games and things. So there used to be a 25% discount for season ticket holders. That's going to be gone.
And like you talk about the money that's involved. This comes on the back of the other things you mentioned. Like the coaches to Wembley and Fergie's job and all the rest of it. I mean. Yeah. Each of those things on its own isn't the end of the world, but when you add them all together, it just looks like they're just not getting it. Do you know what I mean? They're not understanding the fans and how angry a lot of the fans are. And we was at the process at the Trinity statue, like you mentioned. I spoke to 58, spoke to others. I know it was a joint thing because Everton fans are going through a similar thing, so we had Evertonians there as well. But there was real anger there. Yeah. And it's think about, like, Jim Ratcliffe came into this club with a lot of goodwill, because it was like this whole story of it, local boy done good, and he's going to save us from the Glazers and all this other stuff. Well, so far there's been a few decisions that have just almost eradicated all that goodwill.
He's a businessman, he's made his billions by going into distressed businesses and turning them around, making them efficient. That's what he's looking at this doing. And I don't doubt that there is definitely efficiencies that are being made at United that could have been made. There was you hear certain stories and you're like, that wasn't necessary, was it, that kind of spending? Beyond what I'm talking about with the transfers. So he's looking at that thinking that's why I need to make changes. But for fans, it will feel like if you've gone all your life and then, the kids, the under 16s is what I'm thinking. That's the future of the club. That's the people that you want to be activised and, is that even a word? Activated and have activism and be the ones on the stands chanting, and £66 just it's not a fair amount of money to ask them to pay. And it feels almost like you're taking the club away from those people.
Yeah, because when I was a kid, like I stopped going with my dad when I was like 12, and then I used to go on my own, and it was like £4 at the time. Obviously, it's a lot cheaper back in the day. But you then, like me and my mates were like that next generation of fans that go to the game that make the noise, and we look up to the older fans, and it'd be like go to the away games and all that sort of stuff. And once you start pricing those fans out, it does affect the atmosphere. It is going to affect the club in what goes on the football pitch. Plus, you've got them losers down the road who are giving tickets away for free, and they're in the Champions League, and they're challenging. And it's like, it's not easy. I suppose a lot of people who are looking at it and going, I've taken my kids to the game. If I had to take, my 3 kids to the game, and it cost me, I don't know, nearly £200 to go and watch United versus Bodo Glimt, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's going to be people priced out.
And I wonder as well, it like you said, it's the thin end of the wedge. I can't imagine next season they're going, right, they're back down again. I can potentially even all tickets from the start of the season will now be £66, or we'll have this sort of scaled system. But it is like it's a massive price increase.
Yeah.
Compared to some of the kids' tickets, where they're like sort of £30.
Yeah.
It's like it's 160% increase. Like whatever it is. Yeah. It's like that's absurd.
Yeah.
That's like so much more. It's not like it's another £3 this year in line with inflation or whatever.
Yeah.
This is like giant jump for some people. I know most tickets have already been sold and all that, but again, I can't see them lowering it next year and going, that was just a bit of a laugh that we did halfway through the season. It'll probably be everything is 60. Yeah, and like you said, there's an issue where if you can only afford to go and watch Man United if you're quite well off, that just isn't fair, is it? Regardless of where you're from or whether you're there for the day or you live nearby, it shouldn't just be for middle class and up people. It should be for everyone, especially if you're from that community. You live two roads away from Old Trafford and you can't afford to go and watch that club because you don't earn enough money. That's just shit. That is just terrible for me.
And that was part of their sort of mantra coming in, making the club community based. Yeah. And so that's a slap in the face, isn't it? That.
Yeah.
And I do worry what it means for next season. It's also set a precedent that this has just happened without any discussion, any kind of consultation. That's what most FAB and fans forum are upset about. The price is absolutely yes, but also the fact that it's just been done without any. That's the whole point of having fan engagement. And so would something like that? They're saying they'll engage with them now. They had to do it this season. It was really essential, clearly, because they're talking about this PSR. Is 1.5 million going to make them pass it or not? I don't know. When you look at what it's cost to get rid of Erik ten Hag and then appoint Ruben Amorim, you can see the clear line from that. So I have concerns about this. Yeah.
It's tough one, isn't it?
Does seem stupid to me. We'll see.
Because the thing is though, and I'm sure they'll say, if they put everything up to £66, or maybe they do bring sort of concessions back in and it's a bit more scale, but they've taken a 30% jump up in season ticket prices. If that's across the board next season, instead of this 3% of tickets getting you 1.5 million, if that's 100% of tickets, then it's a big difference. Then you're looking at sort of 20s and 30s kind of million. That is a new player or a new something. So I don't, if they get a taste for it now, I can only imagine that they're going to do that going forward. So that is a big concern. Back to the playing side a little bit. Just on, we've seen sort of this experiment so far and almost like two different teams playing. I think you said there were 6 changes to the Everton game, but someone mentioned between the Bodo Glimt game and the Arsenal game there was only 2 changes. So it's almost like you've got 2 kind of teams playing after each other. Do you think that Amorim he keeps mentioning this thing of like, it's going to be difficult, but we need to win as well. How much do you think he's concerned about the results, and how much do you think he's concerned about implementing his style? Where do you see ultimately the line in what he's trying to do there?
Yeah, I think he's probably got, because he does talk about we need to win.
Yeah.
But that was kind of at the end of the answer when he was talking about the storms coming and we'll get found out. I think he realised that he also does need to keep that message coming that we want to win every game. But I don't know. I think he's got a bit of slack, hasn't he?
Yeah.
But at the same time, clearly United made a change this season at that moment because they still are targeting Champions League qualification, and that is a genuine possibility, right? Then it's not far off. I know they've now slipped back down to 11th after defeat last night.
Nice while it lasted, wasn't it?
Top half of the table.
Little trip to the top half of the table. Hey, that's enough of that.
Nosebleed territory.
Yeah.
And so obviously they won't want to get too far away from that. So he might, be pragmatic in certain games. But he throws players on, doesn't he? Like, he's not afraid. What I like about him is that he does make changes in games, like, half-time substitutions or 3 at once at 55 minutes, and then keeping on sort of just changing it so it's cranking it up so you've got like more attackers on the pitch than midfielders. And yeah, obviously that might be an issue sometimes. They might get overrun or it might cause confusion for players, but I would rather someone's trying that than not.
What do you reckon I think you wrote about this, about the expectations for 2025? What do you reckon they are? What do you think the club or Amorim are looking at? Is it just a case of, I don't know, trying to implement this style and seeing, getting everyone used to it, or do you think there are sort of not demands, but certain expectations? I
think it always comes back to Champions League qualifications. I know it sounds sort of sad but I mean, obviously it's not a foregone conclusion with United, is it at all?
No.
So that is your baseline, and if you get there, then hopefully you can sign players that are of better quality, and then you build. And obviously they want to be challenged for the title. Project 150 I think is a big thing that they've got. 2028 that is. So
is that what Omar Barada says?
Omar Barada talked about that quite a bit.
It's 150 years
since United were formed. So that's the code for it. I do like how they always, I say, like, they had projects for signing Sancho, for example, like Project 7, and then it never even got the number 7 shirt.
Brilliant.
And various other.
Was that how many goals he scored for United in 3 years?
He scored last night, didn't he? Chelsea.
Yeah, well, let's ignore that.
Sorry.
What was it, the 5th and a 5-1 win? What did you do?
Yeah.
I love that. He's still a United player technically. We just completely let him go now. Yeah. I do think the Champions League thing is always going to be the thing, isn't it? I really do hope that, because we said this, there's still such a long time to go this season, but he's trying to make such big changes that we don't lose that sense of let him have a bit of time here.
Yeah.
Because I think Ten Hag, I don't want to say he hurt himself with that first season, but looking back at it, if he'd have finished 5th in his first season instead of 3rd, people would have gone, yeah, okay, it's the first season, we're doing something different. And then he'd have finished, or if he'd have done it the other way around, finished 8th and then 3rd, he'd probably still be here. But because he did so well in that first season and then dropped off, it kind of goes against him, doesn't, And I think that Amorim almost needs to use the fact that you've got a bit of leeway here. If you're ever going to finish 6th at Man United or 7th, do it this year. Teach the players the style and then push on afterwards, because I feel like we don't accept that downward season very well as United, as we probably shouldn't, but I think he needs to do that.
It's tough though, isn't it? Because coaches always say there's ups and downs. And when Jurgen Klopp was at Mainz, for example, even before Dortmund, I think he got relegated with them, didn't he? And so it feels like there isn't an acceptance that actually sometimes there's a bit of a dip. I mean, Amorim, for example, won the title at Sporting and then finished 4th. And then won the title again. So it just, and then obviously they were on course for winning the title again this year. Although, did you see they lost at home?
Yeah,
since he's gone.
Things are going a bit wrong since he left.
Maybe he is pretty good.
Battered off Arsenal. And then lost at home as well.
But I mean, Erik Ten Hag on that first season, he, from what I'm told, he believes that he overachieved that year. Yeah. And I think when you look at the squad and. Wout Weghorst started 19 games in a row since, and
didn't have a Premier League goal either, did he?
Yeah. So that's what he was working to get them 3rd, I think, and win a trophy. I think was a really good achievement.
Yeah, and I keep saying this. I think every manager except David Moyes has had one season where they've pretty much got all they could out of their given squad. I think Mourinho getting second with that team was as good as they could have possibly done. I think Ole getting second with his team was as good as that squad could have ever hoped for. I think third in a trophy with that Ten Hag team was as good as that team could have possibly achieved. And I think the problem is all the managers have got us to maximising the squad they have, and then the owners let them down with the reinforcements to take us back to the top. Because we've seen with City now, you don't win the league if you haven't got good players on the pitch. Right. So I think whenever Amorim gets the best out of this team, if it's this season or next season, Ineos have to be there to hold it all up and push it further with the right signings and the right people in the window, because otherwise, much like all these other managers that we've had, there'll be a season where it dips because you didn't get the right players, and then he'll be gone. So, a bit of a big stuff there, but I do think that it's all on Ineos now, really, because I think Amorim is a fantastic coach, personally.
This has got to work, man. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep sitting here, Laurie, saying this guy's the one. Do you know what I mean?
Does it feel different? Are we kidding ourselves that this feels different?
I mean, it does. I'll be honest with you. I thought Erik ten Hag was the right guy. I did. But the main difference between Erik ten Hag and Ruben Amorim is, Ruben Amorim looks more comfortable. It looks like him. He's got that little bit of swagger to him. I know people like that word aura, don't they? Yeah. Everyone's using that. But
charisma.
Yeah, nice. He's got a bit of that. Obviously massively successful in Portugal, the same way Erik ten Hag was successful in Holland. Has a different style though, and it looks like, for me, one of the differences you can see just in these first few games, me and Joe were talking about this the other day, when Erik ten Hag came in and we lost to Brighton and then we lost to Brentford, it was like he kind of went, right, forget trying to play out from the back, forget this, and let's just go long.
Yeah, he did.
And then we beat the Scousers, and then it was like, right, it was just very pragmatic, and it was like, we had that wonderful home record and we finished third, but it wasn't like you could go, oh yeah, I can see how this is similar to what he was doing at Ajax. With Ruben Amorim, he's come in and he's gone, look, we're playing 3-4-2-1, get on board with it. I'll change the players, but the system kind of stays the same. And I know, again, it's only early days, but we didn't really see that from ten Hag because he changed it so quickly to just being a bit more sort of almost long ballish or counter-attacking at times, where Amorim's sort of sticking to his guns, has that charisma, has that sort of this tactical change that we've not really seen before. So there's reasons to believe this is the guy, and if he's not, then I'm just going to have to
then we'll get excited about the next one.
Yeah, then the next one about this guy is really the guy.
Yeah, but anyway, I think that's a nice place to wrap it up. We all believe in Ruben Amorim. That's the main thing to take away.
I do like him. Yeah.
Right.
That's as far as I'll go.
Okay, fair enough. You've got to be a bit more diplomatic anyway.
I like that. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you again, Laurie, for coming on. We'll be back with another episode of Inside United in a couple of weeks' time. It's nice having you on a sort of regular show. It's lovely, this.
Yeah, you can check out all these articles as well. There's a link in the description, so go and check out all the articles we've spoken about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Hit subscribe to the channel if you're already, and hit like on the video as well. Thank you very much for joining us. This has been Inside United with Laurie Whitwell. We'll see you in a bit.